Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About. This is a series spotlighting leaders, authors, artists, marketers, creators, and entrepreneurs sharing tips and expert advice on business, media, technology, and frankly, life itself. I'm your host, Cynthia Nelson, three-time entrepreneur, Forbes contributor, investor, and advisor. Today, we're talking to Brian Vella, AQ. I'm going to do it every single time. AKQA, CEO of the APAC region. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Cynthia. It's wonderful to be here and be with you.
Sorry for slaughtering the name. It's like a tongue twister for me. I don't know why.
It's very common. Surprisingly, for four letters, it's
It's
amazing how
yeah,
many.
I think it's I don't know. You have a really interesting background, and specifically, you started in e-commerce in the late 90s, right? Right before it was the whole boom that was happening, kind of before the bubble happened. So what was that like? What did you learn, and what still holds true today?
Yeah, it was a incredible time. I mean, I often look back and think how lucky I was to be just emerging, I guess, with my career. I was at university, not knowing what I wanted to do. I was working at the local, pub at the time or the hotel and thinking about hospitality. And then the internet sort of emerged, which was bizarre. And I remember sitting in a library just with this browser, might have been Alta Vista or something back then,
Yeah.
and just thinking,
Yeah.
well, what do I do with this thing? Like I knew it was powerful, but I still didn't know what to do with it. But that was the moment when I sort of realized there's something to explore here. And ended up sort of moving away. I grew up in a small country town that happened to have a university campus there, which I was very fortunate about as well, but ended up taking the leap and moving to the city to join a e-commerce startup, which again for the late 90s was not very common.
Right.
And I remember speaking to my parents about it and they had no idea what I was talking about.
Right. Of
Um,
course.
but, I had this instinctive feel that this was something I needed to pursue. So I went and joined this business. It was called wishlist.com.au at the time. It was obviously based in Australia. And not knowing it then, but I've since learnt that it was modeled on the Red Envelope business, which was Scott Galloway's business
Hmm.
many years ago. So it was a gifting business that was established where you could go online, purchase something for a family member or friend, have it hand wrapped, have a handwritten card, and have that shipped anywhere.
Right.
And at the time, that was very new to
Right.
the market. And this was a pure play e-commerce company, which had never been done before. The founder was a guy called Hugh Trong, who was a Vietnamese refugee, who'd come from a very sort of challenging background himself, ended up getting an MBA at Harvard, was in Melbourne, started this business with a couple of siblings. It was a very unique sort of situation and story, and I'm very lucky to have been involved in it. So, I mean, the first lesson there was to follow your instinct, and
Hmm.
it proved to be true that um, it there was something there, and those instincts were correct. So I've sort of carried that with me moving forward. When I feel something, I tend to embrace that and perhaps be a bit more of a risk taker than I otherwise thought I would be, maybe because of those sort of beginnings.
Hmm.
Um, that was really, really important. Um, I learned a lot about resilience because, as you mentioned, that was the sort of first bubble, and things were going a
Yeah.
bit crazy, and there was a lot of
Yeah.
venture capital being thrown around,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of hype,
Oh yeah.
and the bubble did burst, and
Oh yeah.
I was in the middle of that, as I'm sure you remember.
Yep.
So it did teach you about resilience and how to handle setbacks,
Hmm.
because overnight the company was cut by about 70%,
Yeah.
because they just ran out of money, frankly.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it was a bit ahead of its time too. Back
Right.
then, the business model stacks up now, but there wasn't enough adoption from
Right.
people were just spending money online and trusting. There was major trust issues back then too.
Right.
There was a
Of course.
sort of propaganda about putting your credit card on the
Right.
internet
Right.
and concerns about that. So it was a little bit early, but the lessons were significant, and it's that that phrase, you never really lose, you only learn. And I learned a lot through that period around, how to handle resilience and dealing with that. Um, I think additionally, as you asked, what sort of holds true now,
Right.
and I think convenience is still at the top of the tree, right? And that's what that business was designed to provide. And even now, if you can provide something that's more convenient, people are going to choose that pathway. Consumers are going to choose that pathway. Removing friction, making things as easy as possible. We still hold those principles strongly today and try and help our clients achieve those things. Um, the technology, I learned then that, and it's still today, technology is always evolving and wonderful. And it's around how you I guess leverage that in the right ways, because you can do it in the wrong ways too.
Oh yeah.
And companies have spent a lot of money, time, and energy, implementing technology, but for the wrong reasons. Um, but it's fundamental. So that was really a good lesson from then on. And from that point on, I've always found myself working with technologists and engineers, and have really enjoyed that. Not coming from that background, I wasn't a programmer, or IT person even, but now I've found myself running a company that has a third of its employees are engineers or software developers, and that came from the appreciation back in those days.
I think it's super interesting that appreciation for technologists, right? But they speak a very different language than, say, the creative teams or the brand teams. And being able to bridge those is really, really important. And having those skills of understanding how their brain works, maybe, or what they
Mm.
think about, what they believe is important, and translating that over to creative and implementation and what the brands are looking for can't be underplayed.
I think that's exactly right, and I think a lot of creative agencies have perhaps struggled with that. Like
Hmm.
they've had there's been I guess a bit of an imbalance, and of course creativity is still essential, and don't get me wrong,
Of
but I think
course.
it's more about in equal appreciation is how I think about it. So, we've something we've always done is had, our head of technology being really on the same level as our head of creative. And I think both of those are equally important. And then we throw in design in the mix, which is
Right.
a discipline in its own right, strategy, and all of these things being relatively equal. And if you can get them all working under the one roof in a cohesive way, I think you've got something really powerful then. But it is harder than you think, and
Oh
as you
yeah.
point out,
There's
and
magic in the middle, kind of, right? It's an art and a science.
yeah, it really is, because it is very much the whole Venus and Mars thing. You've got,
Yeah,
I mean,
very
the
much.
way the software developers think, as you point out, is completely different from creatives and marketers. And being able to have an environment that they all feel welcome and feel appreciated, I think is really important. And that's something I've always tried to maintain. And I think we've done an okay job of that, which is why we've, had a pretty successful sort of business for a couple of decades now.
Yeah. So, I'm going to switch a little bit on this is a question I kind of ask a lot of marketers is what's keeping your clients or CMOs up at night? And, what's on their mind and how do you guys approach and kind of solve those things with them? But really, what are they thinking about? Like the world is moving at warp speed.
Yeah.
What are they worried about every day?
Yeah, look, I think the warp speed point, the pace of change is huge. There's really never been more complexity, I think, for a marketer, and there's more channels than ever before. There's
Right.
more competition than ever before. There's more technology choices. You've got APIs to deal with. So I think a lot of and Gartner famously said that, it was probably 10 years ago now, talked about how CMOs would spend more money on, technology than CIOs would by
Hmm.
whatever it was, like 2020 or something, which is, quite a few years ago now. And that I think that proved to be relatively true. I mean, I haven't seen the maths on it, but anecdotally, that's not far from the truth. And yeah, they've got a massive amount of complexity to deal with. So our job is to help them navigate that and piece those ecosystems, I suppose, that they're dealing with together, and having that as cohesive as possible for their customers. because I think that's the most important thing is how it feels to a customer. You can have all the tools in the shed
Right.
um, as you like, but it's ultimately the customer experience that matters and the brand experience, and that's where we come in. I mean, at AKQA, we often talk about how the interface is the brand. So,
Hmm.
I mean, in the past, the brand was very much around story you told and communication,
Right.
and those things are still important. How you positioning those things is still important, but now it's the interface the customer has with that brand, often through digital channels, is what they're basing, a really strong opinion on, and they'll quickly move on to the next, you
Right.
know, tab, as you mentioned before,
Yeah.
if if it's easier. So I think it's about for us, it's really helping them navigate that complexity. We have this sort of phrase that we're here to we exist to sort of solve hard problems
Mhm.
for our clients, and that's what gets us out of bed in the morning. And that will always be the case. I mean, because there's always a new um, piece of emerging technology or
Yeah.
a new channel or whatever it might be to deal with, and connecting that together and making a really elegant customer experience is I think what most clients and CMOs want these days.
And what clients demand, as you said, if it's not a great experience, they are gone in 2 seconds.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They're
Yeah, I think
gone.
we've all seen that. I mean, as a consumer yourself,
Right.
you feel, right? Like you have a very low tolerance for
Very
poor experience.
low.
So that's sort of an endless pursuit, um, which we focus on. The other thing that I think is keeping CMOs up at night is the old cost benefit, right? So
Yes.
um, lots of budgets going in this direction, and I think CMOs have always thought about, well, am I spending money in the right area? But now it's
Right.
even harder, I think, to work out because it used to be the four Ps or whatever it
Right.
was
Right.
when we were at school, but now
Yeah.
you're spending your money in so many different ways. So modeling the effectiveness is a constant conversation we're having as well,
And
and being
justifying the spend and the ROI, and is it actually driving sales? It's pretty creative and great technology, but what does my bottom line look like? Am I
yeah.
performing? Especially for, any company, any CMO, but also anybody who's traded on the street, right? What does my last quarter look like versus this quarter? Am I really addressing the clients that I need to address? What's my growth? Have I taken away share from someone else?
Yes.
It's a kind of a 24/7 constant battle because client customers are 24/7.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. I sort of feel for them in many ways if
I
in
think
that
that's why
role.
their tenure is so short. It seems
Well,
like it's 24 months is like bing,
that's
you
true.
know.
No, it's a really good point actually. I think that there's a reason for that, right? Because the
Ah,
intensity is so high
yeah.
and always you're always searching for that result, and yeah, it's fairly stressful.
And there's no
And the
there's no perfection in this. And then comes in AI.
Mm.
What are you seeing in APAC that's the same or different than anywhere else? And how is it impacting advertising and marketing for your clients, for you guys? Like, what are they looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably no different to most other markets. I mean, it's a fairly flat world we live in now. Like we
Yeah.
see what's going on in the US and in Europe in real time. I think there's massive interest in it, and we're probably still at the not even at the height of the hype cycle yet, but
Yeah.
it's getting there, that's for sure. So there's massive interest in it. All of our clients talking about it, and I guess trying to work out which direction they go in. So we're still at
Mhm.
that point where it's what you choose to do with it and making the right choices. I think there's so many options, and we're doing some exploration for one of our retail clients
Mhm.
very recently around with a fashion retailer. So think your favorite fashion brand, and you might be looking for a new dress or shirt or whatever it might be. Um, And we were simulating, well, if you upload a photo of yourself, what what would it mean to the experience if every single product that the retailer showed had you as the model?
Right.
And using, using the sort of emerging technology to do that. And what we found was that, there's a lot of variability in the results. So some of them look fantastic, but it wasn't quite right.
Right.
So from a retailer's point of view, the question then becomes, well, what is our tolerance here? Uh, it would provide a great, we all think a much better experience and probably lead to better conversion, but there's still the chance that it misrepresents. So I think the technology is getting closer, but
Yeah.
it's, and that's just one example, but it's still, it has to be authentic and it has to be fairly robust. And I'm not sure that we're quite yet there. So we're still in the exploration mode. I mean, there are areas where a lot of our, we're seeing a lot of clients investing in things like search. Search
Mm.
is one area I think where it will, it is transforming the way that you do that. And gone are the days where you'll search for a product name and it'll,
Right.
it's towards being more conversational. So
Hmm.
I have a birthday party coming up. I need to host 30 people and then, getting results that serve that need rather than I'm looking for party balloons or whatever it might be.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So we're seeing a lot. I think that to me is almost the where most of the activity is at the moment because it's probably the technology's there for that. But generative AI is fascinating and is emerging really, really quickly. But it's still early days.
I think anybody who's not playing with it is really harming themselves. They're doing a disservice. I should say harming. They're doing a disservice to themselves because it's not going away. It harkens me back to the early 90s in early internet days. Oh, this is never going to catch on. Mainframe, I was told by my CIO at the time, no, no, really, the mainframe is here. That whole PC thing, internet thing, it's really not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh, where have I heard this before? And from his perspective, having only been in that, that was his perspective. And lo and behold, within a couple of years, it had really started to bubble up and I was lucky, like you, to come in super, super early and see all the crazy shit written on napkins that got funded and on Sand Hill Road. And like, I would never, like, now you look at it, you're like, I can't believe they got money for that. And it was a lot of money because it was so new.
Yes.
Um, from your perspective, you've done a lot of things in your career and you've had a lot of experience, but what's kind of the best piece of advice you've ever been given, if you can think of one?
Um, yeah, look, I think the notion that and I can't remember exactly who told me this, but the notion that life is imperfect. So, and I think that translates to businesses as well, which is where we spend most of our waking hours, certainly, you know. So because this, I think we've all, I know I'll speak for myself, but this chasing this unreal standard of
Yeah.
everything's always perfect and it's we're nailing everything. And, I think for a long time in my career, I was chasing that and felt the pressure of that.
Mhm.
Um, and then, yeah, it was only a number of years ago, I think, that this sort of concept that, life is imperfect, business is imperfect, and that's okay. And that was a bit of a moment for me, I think, to embrace that and to learn to live like that. And I think that's very healthy to know that, it's okay. Like if this hasn't worked out, move on to the next thing, try again, and it's what you tell your kids, right? Like it's about
Yeah.
effort and all those things. It's not
Yeah.
the results. But
Right.
it's amazing how in business you can get caught up in
Oh,
that world.
completely.
So yeah, so that came to light for me quite relatively recently. And then that led to I've done some executive education, and the most recent time I was sort of on campus there was with and we were learning a lot about self-compassion, and that was
Mhm.
another really key lesson for me. And piece of advice, I suppose, was to be kind to yourself. which is an extension of what I was talking about before.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
when it is a fast-paced world we live in,
Yeah,
uh,
definitely.
there's a lot going on, and you can forget that, right, at times, and you can burn out.
Yeah.
So
Oh, super quick. Super quick. And
yeah,
I wish they would teach that so much earlier. Right. I
exactly.
wish we didn't
Yeah.
have to learn that so late of like
Yes.
everything's kind of bullshit. And
Yeah.
we're not curing cancer here, people. And if we are, God bless us, but you know, be kind to yourself, give yourself a break, and nothing is perfect. Nothing is
Yes.
as it seems in a lot of ways, and nothing is perfect. No matter how great the Instagram post is, how
Yes.
good they look, it is not perfect for sure.
Yeah. That's probably not even real.
Yeah,
Um,
then there's
but
that.
yeah, but like I think you're spot on. Like I've thought, why isn't this being taught in schools? And it may be because I've got two children in school age,
Yeah.
and they should be learning this now, not when
Now,
you're in your 40s and late 40s. Like
yeah,
you've got to learn this now. So I'm trying to teach them that now. But
yeah,
yeah, it should be in every school. That
yeah,
that should be part of the curriculum.
yeah. I think it's changing. I feel like there's a shift, but it is crazy that you learn it later. And as you get older, you tolerate less.
Mm.
Close the circle of associates and friends that it's how many people do you have as friends? You count five, you're super lucky. And I think
Yes.
we don't learn that early enough. That filter maybe is not developed,
Mm.
but we don't work on developing it either. And part of that's experience, learning the good and the bad, right? Breaking, having your heart broken and having, relationships that don't work and business stuff that doesn't work and failures in careers or failures in relationship. But it is part of it's learning, but also part of it could be taught integrity and kindness and compassion. It's a subject matter that doesn't get a lot of discussion at an early age. And I think it's sad that we wait so long, but we find it eventually
Great.
and share it and pay it forward. Brian, it's been really, really great talking to you. I appreciate your time so much. You're going to
Great.
have a great rest of your day because it's early morning for you. If someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that? Can they email you directly? What would that be?
Yeah, happy to do that. I mean, you can, of course, I'm on LinkedIn and a direct message away. Otherwise, yeah, you can get me at Brian, Brian, at akqa.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cynthia, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.